The first images that I've been given are the selected spots of IVP of this female. On the IVP images, the delayed images of IVP, where we are seeing the ureter has already opacified, I am seeing that on the right side, the pelvic calyceal system and the ureter appears, the visualized part of the proximal and mid ureter appears normal in course and caliber. And on the left side, I can see that the pelvic calyceal system is dilated with the ballooning of the calyces. Bilateral nephrographs, which are visualized faintly, appear normal. So the kidneys appear normal in their size, location, and the axis. But there is gross dilatation of the left pelvis and calyces that can be noted. Coming to the bladder, which is partly filled here, I can notice that there is a smooth filling defect, which is visualized predominantly near the left vesico-ureteric junction. So the left part of the bladder is showing this smooth filling defect. We can further see it well on the more delayed images where the bladder has further opacified, and we can notice that the left ureter as well is dilated. It's grossly dilated up to the distalmost vesico-ureteric junction, where we are seeing that there is a sharp cutoff, and then there is a smooth filling defect which is noted in the intraluminal aspect of the bladder. There is no mucosal irregularity which is associated here, which is important. So to summarize, apart from that, we can see that the bones and the soft tissue predominantly appear normal. There are no other associated anomalies. I can see that there is a single system which is noted on the left side. There is no duplication which is seen on the left side, which is a significant finding. In summary,
so why is that important? Commenting on whether it appears to be a single moiety or a duplicated moiety?
Because, ma'am, we want to rule out a ureterocele in this case, and that is frequently associated with a duplex system where we will have an obstructed system along with ectopic opening, and then we have a ureterocele also, which is typically associated. So that becomes something which is important.
Okay. So can we have a ureterocele with a single system as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Which is not duplicated?
Yes, ma'am, it can. Which is more commonly, in fact, seen in adults. The variant that we see will be a single utopic simple ureterocele is the type that we'll see, and that will be associated with a single collecting system only. So, so to summarize the findings, there is a predominantly well-defined smooth polypoidal filling defect in the bladder, localized towards the left vesico-ureteric junction predominantly. That will be the epicenter, and we can see that there is an abrupt cutoff of the left distal ureter with upstream hydroureteronephrosis, which is noted.
Okay, so another question for you is, since you brought up the duplication and the ureterocele, so number one, because there is no duplication, you feel that this is not likely to be a ureterocele, right?
Yes, ma'am, it still could be, not just on the basis of that we can rule it out.
So my specific question is that anything else on this image which tells you that we should not consider the possibility of a ureterocele in this case?
Yes, ma'am. We can see here at the lowermost aspect of the ureter that there's this very abrupt cutoff of the ureter which is noted, which is going against the normal typical appearance of ureterocele, where we would have a very smooth sort of tapering, and then there is a cystic dilatation that is usually seen. So this abrupt cutoff and this so much upstream hydroureteronephrosis, both of these are not fitting well with primary simple ureterocele.
Okay. A hydroureteronephrosis could be present with the ureterocele as well. Anything else? The morphology, the configuration of this filling defect, does it tell you anything? Does it is it consistent with the ureterocele?
Ma'am, I can actually, there is no associated mucosal edema also that is typically seen with ureteroceles, plus the kind of mass effect that it is having on the wall of the bladder, again, is going against it. So I want to think of a primary bladder mass more than a cystic dilatation of the ureter per se.
So where is the mass effect on the bladder that you see from this lesion?
Ma'am, here in the
filling defect basically that it is producing.
Yes.
Okay. So another important point is that this filling defect is, it is very rounded. A ureterocele that you see, it is more ovoid. Okay, and it is often in line, aligned with the axis of the ureter,
Right, ma'am.
right? So this is, forming a sharp angle with the axis of the ureter, and it is very, very rounded. Whereas if there was a ureterocele, as we see in most of the cases, they are more ovoid, more horizontally oriented. So the morphology and the orientation is not that of a ureterocele. And
Right.
secondly, the ureterocele, as you rightly said, there is no halo that is often associated with the ureterocele. And then secondly, with the simple ureterocele, if there is contrast in the ureter as well as in the bladder, then we expect contrast to be present within the ureterocele as well. If the ureterocele is seen as a filling defect, so that would only be in the case of duplication when there is a non-functioning upper moiety, which is not the case. So because of all these reasons, this is not likely to be a ureterocele. So this is actually important to convey to everybody, because when you see a well-defined filling defect, a smooth filling defect in the bladder, which is located bang at the VUJ, the psychoureteric junction, or very close to it, then we have to think whether to include or exclude the possibility of a ureterocele. So I hope that it is clear to everybody why we will not keep the possibility of a ureterocele in this case, right? Okay, so what are your possibilities, Zenab? Tell me
So, ma'am,
on the
we
eye view.
think on the lines of a primary bladder mass at the top of the list. So, because based on the morphology, which is looking very well defined, no associated mucosal irregularity, so I want to keep a submucosal pathology first, which would be the mesenchymal lesions of the bladder, which are a bit rare, but keeping in mind the morphology, that would be my first differential. So, something like a leiomyoma or paraganglioma, although paraganglioma typically has the history that the patient will have spasms of headache and sweating palpitations while micturating, which is not there. But again, we might not see that in all cases. So paraganglioma, hemangioma could also be a rare possibility here.
Okay, so basically you want to consider a submucosal lesion arising from the wall of the bladder as your first possibility. And the main reason is that it is a smooth filling defect, right? So any other finding on the IVP which goes against, supposing I say that I would like to keep the transitional cell carcinoma or the urothelial carcinoma, which is the most common bladder neoplasm, as the first possibility, right? I put up that statement to you, and the reason that you give to me is that it is a very smooth filling defect.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
any other pointers in favor of your keeping the submucosal lesion as the first against a urothelial tumor, a urothelial carcinoma?
Age of the patient is also something which is not fitting in with a transitional cell CA that we typically see will be in elderly males who have been smokers or other risk factors.
Okay,
That is not there.
absolutely agreed. The clinical scenario, the age and the sex of the patient, that is also favoring the submucosal lesion. What else?
Ma'am, in the first image, if we look at the angles that the mass is forming with the surrounding bladder, if it had been a TCC, there should have been some, again, I'm going about the same thing, there should have been some irregularity which should have
Yeah,
been.
so that is taken, that this is a smooth mass, and a TCC classically has the irregular, the typical front kind of appearance. So that is not there. It is a very well defined smooth filling defect. Agreed. See, the
Uh,
angle thing, I think that would be counterproductive here, because this lesion is making acute angles with the bladder wall, whereas a mucosal lesion is more likely to make acute angles, and a submucosal lesion is more likely to make obtuse angles, right? Obtuse angles and a larger area of contact with the wall of the bladder. All these things will go in favor of a submucosal lesion. But then these are not absolute criteria, because if the mucosal lesion involves the submucosa, or the other way around, the submucosal lesion goes on to involve the mucosa, and also depending upon the size of the lesion. So these angle criteria, they are not very helpful. So if you consider the angle thing here, so that would actually refute your possibility.
right, ma'am.
So I want to ask you, see, conventional imaging is extremely important, and as sir also stressed, Dr. Upreti, that more than 50% of your viva would be confined to conventional imaging. So it is important to pick whatever findings are there, and if the examiner is trying to hint at you to pick up some more things that are probably there that you have missed out, then you have to have a second look on the conventional imaging. Okay, so just try and see if you are able to pick any more findings that will help you.
Negative finding that I can pick up here is that there are no other filling defects which are associated, which would favor a diagnosis of TCC, which is quite frequently synchronous or metachronous. So I am not seeing any other filling defects in the bilateral pelvic alluvial system.
Okay, so if multicentricity is there, that favors a TCC, but if multicentricity or multifocality is not there, it doesn't help us, right?
Is there some focus of classification here, maybe? Like one very fine focus here in the first image?
No, there is no calcification. That is likely just an artifact. Okay, so since you are not able to pick any more findings, so I will ask you some very leading questions now. Tell me, is the position of the distal thirds of the ureter normal?
Ma'am,
Is this how the ureter courses? Is it normal? Do you see the ureter located like this?
Ma'am, there is a definite mass effect which is there, and there is medial deviation of the distalmost ureter which is noted.
Yes. So this is an extremely important finding to pick, that the lower thirds of the ureter is deviated medially, right? Superiorly and medially. This is important.
Yes,
okay, so there are just 2 X-rays that are given to you. So you have to pick all the important findings. So how does this help us? Can this filling defect within the bladder produce this kind of a supromedial displacement of the ureter?
Ma'am, unlikely. So now we also have to keep one possibility that maybe there is one exophytic mass which is having this mass effect and also maybe extending into the VUJ. That could be one possibility, or there is some associated extrinsic soft tissue lesion also which is there. So there is some here, if we notice, there is some soft tissue density which is noted. So those 2 possibilities will now come into play.
So now you are considering number 1, an extrinsic lesion which is causing extrinsic compression, and considering the possibility of an extrinsic filling defect in the bladder and displacing the ureter as well, right? And what was the other possibility? Sorry, I didn't get you.
Is again, ma'am, something which is extrinsically originating and infiltrating into the VUJ secondarily.
Okay, so now, so we rule out the possibility of the submucosal bladder mass now. Does that not hold true, or we still keep it in our DD?
No, ma'am, it still could be one of the differentials, and maybe we have 2 masses. One is outside, one is inside.
2 separate pathologies, you mean?
Yes, ma'am.
See, when you must try to correlate all the findings, okay, it is quite unlikely that there would be totally 2 separate pathologies located. So of course it is not that it would be impossible, but the first effort should be to correlate whatever findings are there and try to fit them into one.
Yes,
so tell me now, we are having 2 possibilities. One is an extrinsic lesion, and one is you still want to keep the submucosal bladder mass still there as the DD. So now how would you arrange them in the order? What would come 1 and what would come 2?
First would be extrinsic because of this mass effect that is not being explained by a primary submucosal mass. And second would be based on the morphology alone, a submucosal mass.
Okay. And supposing we, now since you say that an extrinsic lesion, we should keep it at the first go. So do you think an extrinsic lesion can produce this kind of a filling defect in the bladder, which is seen end-on as an intraluminal lesion and which appears to be making an acute angle? Is it possible an extrinsic lesion would produce a very wide kind of filling defect, right? Yes, very wide, and an extrinsic is more likely to have an even more obtuse angle. Okay, submucosal still they might have right angles or sometimes maybe acute angles. As I said, they do not hold true all the time. But a purely extrinsic mass, is it possible to produce this kind of a filling defect within the bladder? This definitely appears to be an intraluminal lesion, right? You would agree. Okay, anyways. So I would also like now, before going on to the next imaging modality, one more finding that I would like to point to you that you have missed is that, see, one is the displacement of the ureter, and another is you can also see another indentation on the bladder wall laterally. And just have a look, although this is a full bladder image, but see, the right lateral wall of the bladder is reaching right up to the pelvic brim, but the left lateral wall of the bladder is not reaching up to the pelvis, and there is a lot of space here.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so that indicates that there is a soft tissue mass here which is indenting on the bladder as well.
Yes,
Right,
ma'am.
indenting on the bladder and displacing medially displacing the ureter, and at the same time there is a filling defect which is very smooth inside the bladder as well. Okay, so we still keep your two possibilities intact.
Yes, ma'am.
And this finding that I pointed out to you regarding the indentation on the bladder wall, that again goes in favor of something that is extravesical.
Yes.
Okay, so now see, the key term here would be that we have something that is intravesical. There is an intravesical component and there is an extravesical component. Now it is not necessary that the entire pathology is extrinsic. Okay, because a purely extrinsic pathology will not produce this kind of a filling defect or this kind of intravesical component. Okay, right. So what else would you like to do now? Going on to the next modality, what would you require?
Characterize it using an ultrasound.
Right. So first we would like to go in for an ultrasound. So, okay, you can change the slide. You have the controls.
Yes, ma'am. So I've been given the three selected spots of the ultrasound of this particular patient. Here we can see that this is the bladder that is visualized. In the bladder, we can see that there is a well-defined hypoechoic lesion, a round lesion with predominantly smooth, well-defined lobulated margins. The mass is heterogeneous in nature. This is further well visualized in this second spot here, where we can see that in the right posterolateral wall at the location of the VUJ, we are seeing that there is this mass. And also we can notice here, if we look carefully, that there is this figure of 8 sort of appearance, a dumbbell sort of appearance, where there is this extrinsic component also to the mass which is made out. We can see that this is the hyperechoic mucosa, which is seen along the mass, which is lifted up here, which kind of in an indirect manner favors that this is not a primary mucosal mass, but could be a submucosal mass. On the Doppler images, the mass is not taking a lot of vascularity. It is not a hypervascular mass. This is helpful because one of our differentials was a paraganglioma. So that further goes down because this is not showing up a lot of vascularity. So the ultrasound basically is showing us that there is a well-defined hypoechoic mass which has a dumbbell sort of orientation with an intraluminal component as well as an extrinsic component, like we were thinking on the X-ray and the IVP images. So my first, the differentials will still be submucosal mass, but now we have a better understanding of the orientation and extent of the lesion.
Okay, so now tell me, what are your final differentials and in what order?
Ma'am, a leiomyoma would be my first differential.
Okay, so now you are considering only a submucosal mass.
Yes,
the
ma'am.
Extrinsic, is it still under consideration or not under consideration at all?
A bit unlikely. It is still possible that it's an exophytic subserosal fibroid from a uterus, very like a rare possibility where it is coming and impinging, but so much mass effect and the kind of orientation it has inside the bladder, I would keep it very lower down. It looks like a primary vesical mass which is now extending outwards. That should be the first differential, but a remote possibility of maybe a broad ligament fibroid or a very, very subserosal exophytic pedunculated fibroid from the uterus could also be a possibility, ma'am.
Okay, so a few important points. Number one, the uretrocele that we were considering, although we had ruled it out on the IVP itself, so that is totally out of question because this is a solid mass what we are dealing with, right? And again, the TCC or the urothelial carcinoma, it is just not under consideration because, as you very rightly said, we can see an intact mucosa over the lesion, right? The mucosa, you can see it is lifted from the wall of the bladder, and there is certainly a bright echogenic mucosa here. So this is, whatever the lesion is, it is submucosal. So it is a solid mass, it has some vascularity, and then we are also able to appreciate much better in a much more definitive way that there is an intravesical component as well as a large extravesical component which appears to be even bigger in size. Okay, either bigger or maybe we can say equal, but it does appear to be a little bigger than the intravesical lesion.
Yes, ma'am.
Another thing that you should comment upon here is that what is happening to the wall of the bladder in the region of the mass. Tell me.
Ma'am, the wall is thickened. There is thickening of the mass, again keeping with the location of the mass in the submucosal location. So we can see that there is this hypoechoic wall, which is definitely thickened here, and the mucosa is seen separately.
Okay, so basically this is a mass lesion, and the normal wall of the bladder that should have been here in this region, that is totally disrupted, right?
Yes.
You do not see the layers of the wall here, you see just the tumor mass.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a very, very strong hint here that the bladder wall appears to be okay on both the sides. The wall you can see here, the normal wall you can see here, but in this region there is no wall, and there is just the lesion where there appears to be a wasting, or that figure of 8 which you said, that is again a very useful sign. And there is a lesion projecting inside the bladder, very well defined submucosal, and a large lesion that is projecting outside the bladder. So
Yes.
this basically clinches our possibility that we are dealing with a submucosal mass arising from the bladder.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
regarding the broad ligament fibroid or the uterine subserosal pedunculated fibroid that you said, see, those again would not be the possibilities. Number one, the morphology that we discussed on the IVP, that they are not likely to produce this intraluminal lesion. If there is an extrinsic mass lesion and we are talking about fibroid, which is a benign mass, okay, so that would just produce an indentation and compression of the bladder wall. And if it does protrude into the bladder, it would, it would not make this kind of contact with the bladder wall. So this is definitely an intravesical component, and this cannot be explained by a purely extrinsic mass, right?
Yes.
And secondly, the broad ligament fibroid, the location of the broad ligament, it would, a broad ligament fibroid would displace the ureter posteriorly. That cannot displace the ureter medially the way we saw in the IVP.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so those would not be the possibilities, and rather I can say that seeing this ultrasound, we can be fairly certain that what we are dealing with is a submucosal mass of the bladder. Okay, and okay, now you can just enumerate what are the possibilities. Paraganglioma you have ruled out. So what would you like to keep among the submucosal bladder lesions in this case?
It could be a leiomyoma, firstly, which is
Okay.
the common lesion that we encounter. It could be a solitary fibrous tumor, which can also be seen. A rare lesion is an inflammatory pseudotumor, which can also be located in the submucosal layer. Apart from that, a neurogenic tumor, rarely, like a schwannoma or a neurofibroma, can also have this kind of an orientation. Hemangioma and paraganglioma both become kind of unlikely because of the
With this pattern of vascularity, we would not like to consider them, right? So these are all mesenchymal tumors. They are not very common, but if we are encountered with a case which looks like a submucosal mass of the bladder, then we have to give some possibilities. Yes, you are absolutely right. So if you stop sharing, I'll just show you the cross-sectional imaging for further characterization. So this is basically for further planning, for further characterization. Otherwise, we now have a fairly good idea of what we are dealing with just with the help of conventional IVU images and with the ultrasound. Okay, so just give me a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Just put it in the full screen mode. Right. Can you see it full screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we'll move. What do we ideally? What cross-sectional modality should we go for after the ultrasound? If
Ma'am,
the surgeon wants to operate, so
MRI,
what is?
as
Sorry.
MRI would be a better cross-sectional imaging modality as far as bladder masses go, because it gives us better characterization. Also, we can see the bladder wall better. So MRI would be better, but in this case, like both would be.
So what in this case?
Yes, ma'am. In this case
No,
also,
certainly, whatever, it doesn't matter what I show you, but certainly MR is the better modality if given a choice and if you are asked, because CT will not help you in seeing what layers are spared, what layers are involved, and MR certainly has a better soft tissue contrast. It will show you the planes with the surrounding organs better. So if you are asked, then definitely MRI is the modality that you need to go in for.
yes,
So first we have a CT. So just have a look and describe the findings.
ma'am, these are the axial CCT images at the level of the bladder. Here we can see that predominantly in the location of the right posterolateral wall of the bladder,
Left.
left posterolateral bladder wall, we are seeing that there is this well-defined lobulated heterogeneous mass, which is having an intravesical component and a very large extravesical component, which is extending outwards. Apart from that, I am not able to make out the left distal ureter here.
Okay, what about the planes with the uterus? That is something else that you can see on the cross-sectional image, which you were not able to see on IV or ultrasound there.
Yes, ma'am. We can see that the uterus, the mass is abutting the uterus. However, there is no invasion that we are seeing as far as the uterus and the rectum goes. There is no invasion of any surrounding organs. Bilateral vessels, external iliac vessels are seen separately from the mass. And no gross, although bony windows would be better, but no gross bony erosion is what I can see here, but definitely would like to see the bony windows also.
Okay, so now what we are trying to look for on the cross-sectional imaging is, number one, the extent of the lesion, the exact location of the lesion, so that we are able to very nicely see there's a smaller intravesical, a large extravesical component, and number two, the relation with the surrounding structures. So very nicely we can see that it is maintaining good planes with the uterus. So again, the uterine origin is completely ruled out, although we had a fairly good idea with the morphology as well. And although we can see that it is reaching up to the lateral pelvic wall, but again, we can see that the fat planes that it is making with the obturator muscles, again, they are very well defined. So now the question comes that whether it appears to be a benign lesion or a malignant lesion. So would you like to keep the possibility of only the benign masses, considering this heterogeneous enhancement and the large size of the lesion, or would you like to consider the possibility of a malignant mass as well?
Again, ma'am, if it's a malignancy, I would still like to keep the possibilities of mesenchymal malignancy. So maybe a leiomyosarcoma also becomes, it cannot be ruled out on imaging categorically. So a low-grade leiomyosarcoma based on the well-defined lobulated margin, it's not a high-grade leiomyosarcoma, but we can't rule it out. So we have to keep that possibility. Apart from that, other mesenchymal malignancies, maybe a lymphoma also can be kept in the differentials. It is also one rare lesion of the bladder wall.
A primary lymphoma arising from the bladder wall?
Very rare, ma'am, but it could be a possibility. Like a maltoma can be seen from the bladder wall very rarely.
Okay, so tell me some points that on imaging which would help you to distinguish between a leiomyoma of the bladder from a leiomyosarcoma. Although it is not always possible to distinguish just on imaging without histopathology, but still some pointers that might help you.
Ma'am, the invasion of surrounding structures, the morphology, the margins of the mass, which are in this case well-defined, lobulated, favor a benign lesion more than the malignancy. Then when we look at the MRI, that also gives us some idea based on the heterogeneity of the lesion. If it's a predominantly T2 hypointense homogeneous lesion, that favors a benign lesion over an aggressive lesion. So the size and the heterogeneity will be two main factors, and the gross invasion, three factors which will help us decide between a benign and a malignant leiomyoma.
Okay, very good. So basically the large size of the lesion, the heterogeneity. So this lesion is large in size, it is heterogeneous. You can see areas of cystic necrotic change. But the third point, that is, it appears to be extremely well defined. It is having good maintained fat planes with all the surrounding organs. There is no evidence of any invasion, infiltration, or bony destruction on at least the images that are provided to us. So still we will say that in spite of it being a large and heterogeneous lesion, we still have to keep the possibility of the benign lesion first and the malignant lesion second, and it is not possible to distinguish them on imaging. So further going on to the MR images, just have a look.
Ma'am, I've been given the axial T1 and T2 MRI images. So on the upper two images, which are the T1 weighted images, we can see that again there is this lobulated dumbbell-shaped configuration. The mass is predominantly T1 iso to hypointense to the surrounding muscles. And we can see very, very well-defined margins, ma'am, here, much better than the CT. We can see that there is no invasion, which is noted of the surrounding lateral pelvic wall, as well as the perivesical fat also can be made out quite clearly.
Yes.
On the T2 weighted images, ma'am, it is T2 heterogeneously hyperintense. And we can make out the dumbbell-shaped configuration here, and the margins with the uterus, the planes with the uterus postero-medially are well defined and maintained. So we can say that there is no invasion of the surrounding structures.
Right. Some more images in other planes.
Ma'am, in the sagittal images, again, on the T2 weighted images, we can see that the mass has this broad base with the bladder wall. And we can see the intrinsic as well as extravesical component quite well, and fat planes maintained.
Right. So again, MR is just a repetition of the findings, just better seen, better depicted. They make us more confident. That's all. Otherwise, we had picked most of the findings. A few little hyper intense foci we can see on T1. What could these be?
These could be, ma'am, tiny, maybe hemorrhagic foci which have happened. On T2, it is grossly heterogeneous, so no correlation per se, but could be tiny hemorrhagic foci. That could be one possibility.
Right. So these could be tiny hemorrhagic foci, just very, very little foci are there. Otherwise, we can see that it is again a well-defined mass and heterogeneous, which we could make out on CT as well. And the planes are even better seen, as you said, the maintained perivesical fat planes can be seen. Again, both the intra and the extravesical components are seen. And this is the last image, axial image, which just again shows you the morphology of the mass in a better way, right? So what is your final diagnosis or final differential diagnosis?
Ma'am, leiomyoma or leiomyosarcoma, a low-grade leiomyosarcoma, if at all. But my first differential would be a benign lesion or a low-grade leiomyosarcoma, because two features like the large size and the heterogeneity are going in favor of a low-grade leiomyosarcoma, but first would be a leiomyoma. Apart from that, it still could be a neurogenic lesion, a rare neurogenic tumor like a schwannoma, because
Okay, so tell me, is there any specific MR finding for a neurogenic mass, a neurofibroma?
No, ma'am. The T2 heterogeneous nature, this kind of an appearance, schwannomas can show a lot of times. So schwannoma.
Okay, schwannoma can have a heterogeneous appearance. Neurofibromas are actually more common in the bladder rather than schwannomas, coming to the neurogenic masses. So any specific T2 finding with a neurofibroma that actually clinches the diagnosis if present? And we actually look for the finding on T2MR.
Target sign on neurofibromas.
So what's the target sign? How does it look like?
We have a central hypointense rim and a peripheral hyperintense area, which represents the myxoid part of the neurofibroma, whereas the central part would be hypointense.
Right. So that target sign is very specific on neurofibroma, which we are not seeing here in this case. But nevertheless, it can be, we cannot rule out a neurogenic mass as well. Anything else that is left? You said about solitary fibrous tumor. Can we keep that as a possibility?
Unlikely, ma'am. It show exquisite T2 hypointensity that we are not seeing here. So that would be much lower down.
Okay. So how does the typical leiomyoma look like on MR?
Ma'am, leiomyoma would be hypointense to the bladder wall typically, where we would see that it is T1 and T2 iso to hypointense on the T2 weighted images, T2 hypo to the wall. And also we will see that it is usually homogeneous, although in this case we are seeing some sort of heterogeneity, but more commonly they would be homogeneous T2 hyperintense, T1 isointense masses.
Okay, so leiomyomas are more the solid homogeneous or the classical leiomyomas are more commonly hypointense or on T2, just like the uterine fibroids, but they are commonly degenerated. So you may not always have that homogeneous hypointense appearance, but when they do appear homogeneous hypointense on T2, then that goes more in favor of a leiomyoma or the solitary fibrous tumor. Right. And anything else? Hemangioma, paraganglioma, we ruled out. Anything else which is significant? Lipoma, of course, it cannot be. That is one more DD, but then that would show the fatty intensity.
Inflammatory
right.
Pseudotumor was one more thing. It can still be that. But
sorry?
Inflammatory pseudotumor is again one more lesion which is rare, but still it fits the appearance.
Actually, for an inflammatory pseudotumor, we are not finding any signs of inflammation anywhere in the perivesical fat. Yes, no soft tissue stranding, neither on CT nor on MR. So to keep the possibility of an inflammatory pseudotumor, at least we should have some feature of inflammation. There is no wall thickening elsewhere in the bladder. Right. So we need to have some inflammatory features to put the possibility of an inflammatory pseudotumor. Right. So inflammatory pseudotumor we will not keep as a possibility in this case. But of course, the remaining things which you mentioned, we will certainly keep them. So very well handled, Zainab. Congratulations. Your approach was really good. The only thing is that some findings you missed on conventional. So actually that is what I would like to stress to all the residents, that you have to pay more attention to conventional imaging. And I know when it comes to cross-sectional imaging, you are better than us. You are masters. But then conventional imaging is important for the exam, and every attempt must be made to pick all the findings on the X-ray or the barium or the IVP, whatever has been provided to you. And another important teaching point from here is that more than one findings, always try to correlate and put them into a single pathology rather than thinking of two different pathologies. That would come in a very, very rare situation. Most of the times you will be able to fit the things into one, but you really performed well. Very good. So I'll just summarize. So this is just for the benefit of all, to just once again stress on the teaching point. So here I'm comparing how a ureterocele would look like. As I said, it would have the ovoid kind of configuration. It would be oriented horizontally or obliquely, and it would be aligned with the axis of the ureter. Whereas here you see this is a rounded mass and this is not in line with the ureter. Okay. And secondly, the ureter would be normally positioned, not displaced like this or the bladder indented here. So ureterocele, we straight away rule out this morphology, this configuration doesn't fit with a ureterocele at all. But it is important that if you find a smooth filling defect in the bladder, then you must rule out the ureterocele. Now, why I kept this case here is, as I told you, that if it is a simple ureterocele which is normally located, then if there is contrast in the ureter and the bladder, there would be contrast in the ureterocele as well. But if it is associated with a duplicated moiety, out of which as you know, the upper moiety is more commonly associated with the ureterocele. So if the upper moiety is dilated and non-functioning, then you might see one normally functioning kidney, one normal ureter, and still a ureterocele which does not fill with contrast. So then you have to look for the upper moiety, a duplicated moiety with the upper moiety which is not functioning, and that produces the characteristic drooping lily sign on the eye view. That is, there is an increased distance between the upper pole of the kidney and the functioning calyces that you see, and at times it produces compression or drooping of the lower calyceal system. Just a couple of words about about the UB masses. So as you all know, the epithelial masses are more frequent, and out of these, the urothelial carcinoma is the most common. So we have already discussed all these things in the discussion of the case. So just a recapitulation for you, that because they arise from the superficial layers, you would always find an irregular intraluminal mass. the urothelial carcinoma or the epithelial masses, be it urothelial, be it squamous cell or the adenocarcinomas, which are rarer varieties of the UB masses, they would be seen as predominantly intraluminal masses. And even if they do infiltrate the bladder wall, even if they go on to invade the surrounding organs, the prostate, the vagina, the uterus, still the perivesical component would be much lesser. Okay, so they would be primarily intraluminal or intravesical masses, and the urothelial carcinoma characteristically has the irregular, the frond-like appearance. Most of the times, small calcific foci may be seen, as I'm sure you commonly see on imaging. And then the multicentricity we talked about. So with epithelial neoplasms, you need to evaluate the complete urinary tract. So this is a typical image, a companion image of a urothelial carcinoma, this frond-like appearance. And this was actually a case of a squamous cell carcinoma. So still it is an epithelial neoplasm. And as you can see, there's a lot of mucosal irregularity, mucosal destruction here. So this helps you to make out whether it is an epithelial or a subepithelial neoplasm. So coming to the non-epithelial or the mesenchymal tumors, because they are arising from the submucosa, they tend to be very smooth, as in our case, and they may produce intravesical or intramural lesions. At times, they may just be seen as a smooth indentation of the bladder wall. And remember that if you are finding a significant extravesical component of the lesion, then you have to think of a submucosal mass rather than an epithelial tumor. And then we discussed that when it is making an obtuse angle and larger area of contact, then we need to think about the submucosal or the extrinsic lesions. But then this doesn't always help in distinguishing the epithelial and the submucosal lesions. So these are the more common entities among the malignant: leiomyosarcoma in the adult and rhabdomyosarcoma, the commonest submucosal bladder mass in the child. In fact, the most common bladder mass in the child is a rhabdomyosarcoma. And these are all the benign lesions that we discussed. So just to show you some examples, these are both examples of leiomyomas of the bladder. You can again see this extremely well-defined, smooth lesion, homogeneous, which is there protruding in the bladder and having this predominant intravesical component. And whereas this is a heterogeneously enhancing degenerated mass with a large intravesical and a significant extravesical component. So the final diagnosis in this case was a degenerated leiomyoma, and I think we have discussed all the imaging findings already. They cause smooth indentation or may be seen as intramural or intraluminal masses, classically solid, smooth, homogeneous, but may show degeneration, which would be seen as cystic necrotic areas, and MR is the modality of choice. Thank you so much.